Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you there. Just a little bit of technical difficulties, as always. So, thanks for being here, first of all. And I'll just start a little bit about a topic here, of how to build your business and protect yourself pretty much against cyber criminals. I'll start with myself. My name is Adam Sbeta. I am a cybersecurity analyst with Cybercrime Experts. What we're here for is mainly trying to prepare best practices that businesses can follow that are basically non-technical on the cybersecurity end. Cybersecurity is not all technologies. A lot of it is about business process and procedures and understanding where your data sits. Just a little bit myself, what got me interested in cybersecurity and when I was 14, I kind of was seeing in the tech world where everybody looks at the operating system that gets hit with the virus, damages a lot of menus, damages a lot of things. And the common practice is to, when it's so infiltrated, is to wipe up your machine, install a new operating system, reimage your machine. Is that anything that any of you guys have seen? Kind of have that blank desktop. Does anybody share that experience? Like, as you're getting a new computer every year, you're hit with the virus. And I felt that that experience is so inconvenient for users. And I was thinking of what are the damages that these viruses can do to your operating system, and how can we actually fix those? So I started collecting viruses and testing them on the side to see what kind of damages do they cause to your operating system. So instead of reinstalling your OS, that we could probably fix the problems themselves and give you a more user-friendly experience as of having your desktops where it's at, your menus where they're at, your files stored at the same place. And part of the challenge is that there are so many viruses out there, and everyone has different types of attacks. So fast forward when I was 17, I saw a hacker stealing people's Yahoo accounts, basically making use of their contacts, specifically looking for girls. And I see people's frustrations that he's stealing passwords from people over and over and over again. And I eventually had a little bit of a thought to try to see what tools is he using to steal people's passwords. I took that tool, I kind of looked how it worked, and I found a software flaw. I found out how can I protect my password against the same tool that he's been using over and over again. Eventually, after protecting myself, I decided to use this tool, but this time against him. Eventually, I had a look in his eyes, getting the notification that his password was changed. That frustration that he caused people to feel, he was feeling that in 10x time. He had a huge list of contacts. He's deleting them one by his own hand to make sure whoever attacked him did not have that data. So that got me thinking, the same type of tool that he was using to penetrate other people's contacts was used for, I would call, a good cause. Does anybody agree? No? Raise your hand. Okay, that makes me feel better. So fast forward a couple years ago, I was looking at the trend. Cyber attacks has been changing. I mean, not a couple years ago, but several years. But when we're looking at the point 2 years ago, the cyber attacks were so involved into the enterprise space just to make money. When I was young, cyber attacks were all about fun. How many networks can you penetrate? And they kind of look at that as a kind of a pride. So what was happening is enterprises are trying to snag any experts they can find, even though they're in a huge shortage. And eventually, they're kind of raising their guards, and hackers are finding it a lot harder to get into an enterprise space, even though we hear about it a lot in the news. But when the money streams from enterprises would go down, they're going to find a new way for a money stream. And unfortunately, 2 years later, we're already there, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So before we start, I want to look at some terminologies. Cybersecurity has 3 pillars. Confidentiality, to make sure whoever has access to the data is the only person that sees the data. Integrity is making sure whoever is able to modify the data is the person that modifies it, and there's a track record of it. So when you have an access to a list of data, you know that this is what it's supposed to be, and you can believe it. For example, your bank account. There's a big amount of integrity into that. Availability is the part that is misunderstood. Availability is usually looked at as of IT, but what IT usually look into is how can they keep you running, or how to solve a technical problem, where being a pillar of cybersecurity is the huge focus of cybersecurity is keeping your business available, keeping your business running no matter what. And we'll talk about that in a bit. And all of this is involved into data, regardless if it's locally with a third party like a vendor or supply chain, or in the cloud. Another terminology around World Wide Web. We have the surface web, which is what you browse every day. You go to Facebook, you look at the news on BBC. These are the type of avenues that you get into on the surface web, which is basically anything that is indexed by Google, anything you can search and access. Then we got the deep web. Okay, sorry, let me get this a little smaller. Okay, so then you got the deep web, which is basically anything that is not searchable on Google. For example, you don't want your emails to be read by any stranger. You don't want your LinkedIn posts or PayPal transactions to be out in the wild. You don't want libraries, university libraries, to be out in the public if it's accessible by credentials. So that's where the deep web sits. It's the stuff that is not indexed. The dark web is also not indexed. However, it's not accessible by the general public. What I mean by that is that it's not accessible with installing a Chrome browser or Internet Explorer and you just go to www.yahoo.com, if anybody still uses that. But the dark web uses a special browser that has 3 layers of encryption to somewhat guarantee anonymity. Anonymity does not necessarily mean for bad stuff. A lot of people are concerned about their privacy. They don't want the NSA to see what they're looking at. So there's good and bad uses of that. And unfortunately, the bad use of it, we can get into the actual marketplaces. There's marketplaces because of anonymity where you can sell drugs, you can sell weapons, you can sell any kind of stuff that is illegal and you don't want traceable. Another term I want to look at is hackers. Obviously, when you Google hackers, all you see is these shadows, black faces, hoodies. That's kind of what caused the cybersecurity industry to try to change the terminology into black hat or white hat or blue teams or red teams. There's just basically different terminologies of how you get access to networks. The black hat hackers is basically what these images are referring to, which is the bad guys are using the tools for to infiltrate networks. This is what a hacker looks like. This guy here was in jail because he shut down the internet in a African country in in Central Africa, and comparing this face with the images you see on Google is quite different. attacking the internet in Africa is not a simple example. It's not the only example we see. The internet was paralyzed mostly on the East Coast in 2016 for 3 hours. And the way that happens is the US is where internet actually started. We have the largest backbones in the world in terms of internet traffic. We are prepared to double and triple our traffic, but that would take weeks. We do have construction, we do have equipment, we do have fiber networks, which are called dark fiber, that is able to get the amount of traffic, but it's not expected for internet traffic to go 10 times in a second. So with a lot of these Internet of Things devices you see, like the thermostats, the smart refrigerators, the smart cameras, all these are connected to the internet. And most of these have default passwords on them that the factories have done. So if the password is found on Google, then that password can be used to take over these devices. And that's what happened in 2016. Hackers had access to tens of millions of devices to paralyze our internet in 2016 for 3 hours. Part of Western Europe, mostly on the East Coast. Was anybody in the East Coast around those times? Okay. Unfortunately, 3 years later, hackers have a lot more power than what they had in 2016. That's just something to think about. If you don't care about security for your business, you don't care about the data of your business, that's fine. You should at least take a look at your supply chain, your vendors, your customers. That data is valuable and they trust you to take care of it. If you don't care about that either, that's fine. Care about the next generations. Care about the internet as a whole. Can be at risk. If you, as an individual, have 10 smart devices with default passwords, what is 1 billion times 10? If these devices have default passwords, they would have a lot more power than what they do now. Just something to think about. What we're talking about today is what threats are small businesses facing? Obviously, half the battle is to know what kind of risk you're at. We'll look at what national standards are there and then kind of how to secure from them. We'll start with the results. Looking at military advancements, the US has known to always be 20 to 30 years to 50 years ahead of the rest of the world. That's what made us the greatest country on earth. And US had a partnership with Israel to expand and improve the F-16 program. Due to funding, the US has stepped out of it, and I don't know if its rumors are true that Israel has sold those designs to China. Afterwards, when the Soviet Union was falling, China has taken over some of the designs of Russian fighters that can combat US fighter jets. And they've used those to build some of their military there. Unfortunately, now is a totally different world. They don't need to buy technology. They don't need to steal it from people or having individuals like Edward Snowden or so forth that is ready to send information no matter what. He probably didn't do it for money, but there's others that would. And they don't even need to go that far. They don't need to have spies and so forth. Their J-31 program is quite similar to F-35 and designs for the F-22 program as well. And all of that information was not given to them. It was not sold to them. That's what we call cyber espionage. Basically, we have government states that are funding private cyber groups to have an agenda, whether that agenda is to attack the public or to improve their military power. The Chinese have built the J-31 before we even had F-35 in production. So yes, it's not as advanced, but basically they're cutting off the development stage and our research that we're doing to build something faster than us. And that's something to think about as well. is the major cause of all these cyber espionage and the amount of data that is leaking into other governments is us. It's the small business space. We are working with the government. We're looking for government contracts. We are the weakest link. I'm not saying that the federal government is perfect or the DoD is perfect, but we are much smaller than them. We have much less policies. And that's something to look into. Ransomware, just a little brief. If you look into how it started in 2013, there's a few branches from 2011 to 2013. Look at the boom between 2015, which there's a few branches here, to 2016. All the way on the right is all 2016. That was a huge jump into the type of ransomwares that are out there. And it's just continuously getting worse. Popcorn is a type of ransomware that you don't have to go look for Bitcoin and buy money to pay the ransom. You can have an easier way out to just send a link to a couple of your friends. If they get hit, you get your data free. Would anybody like that? So just to, they're getting creative. They're adding to their marketing budgets. And, that's kind of the things to think about. So ransomware is not only local. Does anybody use any of these services? Dropbox, Office 365? You can raise your hands, please. Half of you? I don't believe that. Just kidding. So 26% of ransomware in 2017 were in the cloud. That means your emails on Office 365 or G Suite or Gmail, your Dropbox where you share your files through, your Box and Salesforce. These are just simple examples. It's just something to think about is you're not sending your data in the cloud because it's more secure. It could be more physically secure because they have doors and locks, but hackers are not going into your doors to steal the data. They're not going into these data centers to steal the data. Something to think about. Microsoft, for example, in their contract are saying that they cannot guarantee that they can recover the data when it's lost. If you delete an email, sorry. The same thing as Microsoft is responsible for the security of the cloud, which is basically the physical devices. But you're responsible of the data in the cloud. So that's the things that you need to look into. What is the shared responsibility? It doesn't mean that you're just sending out there. That means it's safe. Unfortunately, as I said, a couple years ago, the trend has been growing. And unfortunately, we're already there. 3/4 in 2017 of data breaches were from small businesses. What you see in the news is not what is the only thing that is out there. Small businesses do not announce these breaches. 60% of them already go out of business. So this is something to look at is the trends that you hear in the news is not the actual trends that is in real life. In 2018, 58% of cyber attacks were against small businesses, and the average cost is $385,000. That's the average cost for the small business space. If you look at cybersecurity in general, $600 billion was the economical damages last year. It's projected to be $6 trillion by 2021. Regardless if you believe that or not, I mean, cybersecurity is full of trends. But Equifax cost them to date over $1.4 billion of a mistake of an unpatched server. Even though Homeland Security has literally warned them a month before. Their CEO has received this warning. They have acknowledged it. They have sent it to their team. They didn't have a process to follow up. They knew about it. They were hit afterwards. Now it cost them over $1.4 billion, and you probably heard about the settlement recently, about $650 million, to try to get by legally. Swedish company. Their revenue is over 100 billion. which equates to about 10 billion US dollars. They were hit with a ransomware. What would you expect a billion-dollar company be asked for ransom? Any guesses? €270. They didn't know it was a billion-dollar company. It was just a random attack. This is how low they're getting. Security cameras. Passwords for security cameras has been sold on the dark web for $10. That's how low they're getting. So passwords for your email address, a lot cheaper. Credit union, this is a phishing attack that was sent to a user, basically money laundering officers that has been told they're acting like a credit union. They're saying, hey, this is a transaction that we feel is suspicious for money laundering. According to the US Patriot Act, you should investigate. Open this PDF to find the report. The PDF was malicious. Opening a PDF file can take over your machine. There was a vulnerability on iPhones. Opening a picture can take over your phone. So these are the things that your user need to be aware of. So the data breach notifications is more devastating, is that you need to tell your customers you had a breach. In California, immediately. Federally, 90 days. You don't have a chance to investigate. You don't have a chance to build a plan to tell your customers what you're doing about it. A simple example was a real estate company in San Francisco. They had a laptop, a tablet, and a flash drive in the car. I don't know who leaves a laptop in San Francisco in the car. It almost guaranteed to be broken into, and it was. Because they didn't take 2 minutes to encrypt that laptop, which costs $0, they had to announce the data breach. It only taken 2 minutes to prepare that laptop and those mobile devices to be encrypted before it goes out. So when these are stolen or lost, they don't, whoever got them will not have access to the data. So complying with national standards, cybersecurity is really not a blue or red pill. You'd wish you'd just, swallow that and wake up in the morning and feel that nothing happened. That's only in the Matrix. And cybersecurity is also not a Mr. No-no. It's not supposed to hold you back. It's not supposed to slow your operations. There is a balance between security and efficiency. That's something to look into. The government has spent millions of dollars building a cybersecurity standard for the public, for the government entities. It's written in human readable format to be used. It's not an IT tool. It's a list of actions you need to take. It's built into 5 functionalities. I'm just going to go through a couple. Identifying everything. Identifying your assets, identifying your data, where they sit, regardless if it's with you, with a third party, or in the cloud. You need to know where your data is. You need to know that manager that has a business credit card signing up for Dropbox on his own without IT knowing. You need to know where that data is. If you don't know it, you can't protect it. Simple example is a fish tank in a casino. It had a default password. It was connected to the internet, having a smart thermostat. And obviously, it was infiltrated. It had access to the network. They got access to the database of the high rollers through a fish tank. That's where I talk about identifying your assets. You need to know anything connected. Don't only think about recovering your data. You need to understand how fast can you recover. Bristol Airport took them 2 days to bring their screens of arrivals and departures online. Can anybody imagine what an airport would look like, not knowing when your flights are coming in? That's what happened there, and took them 2 days to come back online. DLA Piper, one of the largest law firms, were hit in Sweden. Their corporate network was infected worldwide. It took them 9 days to barely become operational. Little medical office in Michigan, 3 doctor offices. They decided to shut down. Something to think about. security business against cybercrime isn't really about technologies and advancements and buying this and buying that and getting these high-priced services, regardless if they're available or not. Some of a trend where the big companies has been going through is cyber insurance. They buy big policies, they expect themselves to be protected, and insurance companies has been considering part of these ransomware attacks as an act of war because of how massive they go. Unfortunately, a lot of these big breaches were not really covered by cyber insurance. So that's not really a way out. I know of a business that their cyber insurance has covered them for $4 million, and then they eventually decided to sue their client back because of negligence. Something to think about. Firewalls is not just building a wall, like a Great Wall of China to protect yourself. Right now, you no longer have perimeters. It's not just about data in your office. It's all over. You have mobile devices all over. You have network traffic that is encrypted, which is considered to be an industry standard, but firewalls cannot see that. Traditional firewalls cannot see human traffic, for example, here that have bags. Imagine an airport going through security check-in without looking at your bags, just looking at yourself. That's what's going on into your network. There are next generation firewalls that can open these packets, look into the bags, and see what's in them. They have included intrusion detection system to try to understand anomalies, to stop traffic when they need to, which is, if you have an intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, you build policies into how to stop everything. And these are fairly cheap. There's a lot of vendors that are sending to the small business space. But your traditional firewall, regardless of how updated it is, it does not have a capability to look at the actual traffic. Security awareness is, obviously, a big talk into the cybersecurity space because the entry point to every organization is human. And looking at a picture like this, has anybody heard of the ballistic missile attack on Hawaii Island? So a few days before, this picture was sent on social media of an operator of their emergency management system who didn't know that there was a password on his screen. There's rumors that that password was used to trigger that emergency system response, which I kind of doubt. There's a lot of debate about that. But regardless, a practice like this needs to be looked into. Remember, if somebody has a password and can get access to your account, is the worst thing that you can do. You can't just rely on a password because people reuse passwords everywhere. Passwords are being sold everywhere in the dark web. Just a simple another example of a phishing attack that can be a lot more targeted than the credit union that was just generic. George was going on vacation. He had a party with Clara, which is his colleague. On LinkedIn, she shows as an account payable. So somebody sent a message saying that, hey, I forgot, it was great meeting at the party. I forgot to mention that, I have this great deal and, please transfer $50,000 as a deposit. You can notice the urgent call of action, and that's kind of what hackers use in phishing a lot is, how can you act fast? They need to trigger people's attention to not think twice, to not ask questions. These are things that your users need to understand. Antiviruses. Does anybody use any of these brands? Okay, so antiviruses are known to look at a list of signatures of what are the files that are known to be bad. Unfortunately, hackers know that. So they've been created new signatures every day or every hour to fool these antiviruses. So the same amount of infection is repeatedly being infiltrated into the world. And that's what caused, WannaCry, for example, to hit 100,000 organizations in one weekend. They used cyber warfare tools that were stolen from the NSA. They use our tools against us. So that just tells you that the traditional antiviruses just cannot work anymore. They've been dead for over 10 years. They know that they're struggling to prepare. And the alternatives is that there is next generation tools that look at a behavior of a file. It does not only look at signature. This is an example of a ransom that was requested in an email that, I have your camera videos, and if you don't pay me this and this much, I'll, publish all this questionable stuff online. And they know here, they're saying that they're changing their signatures every 6 hours so your antiviruses don't recognize it. USB drives, everybody loves them, right? There was some kind of a contest quiz on cybersecurity in Taiwan, and the Taipei police gave the winners a flash drive as a reward. Unfortunately, they didn't know that their vendor was infected, and the 54 flash drives were infected. That's the reward of succeeding on a cybersecurity quiz. Hopefully they didn't open them. But it's you don't go too far. I mean, Schneider Electric, which is a huge electric company, they build a lot of these APC, power supplies or power backups for your computers. And they had flash drives that were infected in their supply chain. So it doesn't really matter who you trust. Everyone loves free Wi-Fi. What people don't understand is your mobile device looks at the strongest signal. And when you're in a Safeway or in an airport, the actual signal is going to be in the ceiling, somewhere behind the walls, where somebody sitting next to you can have a stronger signal with that same name. Your devices automatically can connect to it. A simple example here in the middle, the evil hacker has a honeypot. You're going to yahoo.com, he's sending you to a fake site called yano.com. Something to think about. Most companies have, most mobile providers have unlimited data. They have hotspots. Why don't you use them? Backup recovery, understand that you're in a disaster, worst case scenario, how safe is your data? How back does it look into? So there's a recovery point objectives of how much of data can your business afford to lose. Recovery time objective is how much downtime can your business afford to go back online. These are things you need to plan for in a worst case scenario. What is your business going to look at? San Francisco transportation system, for example, has been hit with a ransom. And on a Thanksgiving weekend, they had two choices. Either shut down the transportation system, which is not an option. San Francisco, they don't even use cars. Or to open up the public fares for free, which is what they decided to do. They're using buses with paper maps, and they opened the fares for the public. That cost them a loss of $1.5 million of just uncollected fares. Just eventually getting paid from our tax dollars. Something to think about. How fast can you recover? There's a lot of passwords being sold in the dark web. If you ever had a LinkedIn account or Yahoo account, all of these companies have been breached. Dropbox has been breached in the past. So a lot of these major companies, even if you keep your passwords safe, there are people that have your passwords from other places. They're being sold on the dark web, and people have patterns of how to change the password, adding special characters, adding numbers, so forth. These are common changes. Artificial intelligence is not only for the good guys. The bad guys can predict how you change your passwords. So understanding what passwords you have out in the dark web should be enough for you to change them wherever you use them. Can everybody take their phone out, please, if you don't mind? Who have iPhones here in the room? Good. Dish them out the window, please. I'm just kidding. I'm not making, I'm not here to make enemies with Apple fans, but if your iPhone is 3GS or above, iPhone 4 and so forth, they're all encrypted by default. As long as you have a PIN, your device is not accessible. Does everybody have PINs here that are holding iPhones? So I don't care if your whole family knows about it, but as long as you have a PIN and you drop it, then a non-family member will not be able to get your data. Android folks, I'm an Android fan, but it's a little tricky there. What I would suggest is maybe like Googling, for example, how to encrypt my Samsung S or Samsung 7 or whatever. And if you find an article for that, then great. Most of the newer phones actually have encryption. Make sure you use it. The takeaway here is I want to make sure you have an idea of what to discuss in your business. There are several technologies and processes that can protect 97% of today's attacks. No matter how much you hear, a $600 billion loss in our economy, while there are tools that can keep you safe. So there's a checklist I'll be giving you guys, whoever is interested. There's a data recovery calculator, which when I'm talking about the recovery time objective, recovery point objective, is to understand how much can your business afford. So you put in the times that you have right now. You can sit with your IT people, see how, what are those objectives are, and you can see how much is that going to cost your business. If that's a cost you can afford, move on. If it's a cost your business could shut down because of, you need to change those points. So that's a free calculator I'll be sharing as well. Dark web scanning, we were very graceful to have a vendor actually give everybody a free scan on the dark web. Show you what passwords you have out for all of your users, and give you the first 4 characters for privacy to understand what password was used, so you know to change it and to inform your users to change it. Last thing